Welcome to another live edition of Cooking at Home with the Caprios. Today, we will be making another recipe from my mother's cookbook. It's one of my all-time favorite soups, Filomena's Zuppa di Fagioli. Now, before we get started, I wish to acknowledge that today is Memorial Day and thank all of those men and women who have served in the armed forces for the sacrifices that they made to keep us safe, and also acknowledge their families who also made several sacrifices. I would also like to honor all of those men and women in the healthcare industry and the public service industry and the police and the fire and the doctors and the nurses and the grocery store operators who are real heroes today for their contributions to our society, for placing themselves in danger every single day to help us. Okay, now onto the food. Joining me in the kitchen is my son David, who is actually somewhat of an expert at making Filomena's Zuppa di Fagioli. David?
Thanks, Dad. Indeed, it is my go-to comfort food. It's delicious, very nutritious, and with the shortage of meat in the grocery stores, it's a great source of protein. Now, some may question the wisdom of cooking bean soup during a lockdown. Remember that old rhyme? Beans, beans, they're good for your heart. But I say, we throw risk to the wind and go for it.
Okay, so let's get started.
And here's all the ingredients you will need. No need to take notes. The recipe will be posted in the comment section. 1 16-ounce can each of red kidney beans, cannellini beans, pink beans, and garbanzo beans. A half pound of brown lentils. A half pound of hot Italian sausage. 10 ounces of kale. 1 large white onion. 1 habanero pepper. 1 quart of chicken stock. 1 quart of vegetable stock. 1 chicken bouillon cube, some black pepper, red pepper flakes, extra virgin olive oil, grated Reggiano Parmigiano cheese, and some hard-crusted Italian bread.
While those are the ingredients that we use, feel free to adjust the recipe to your own personal taste, because all cooking is personal. That's why Heinz makes 57 varieties, because everyone likes something different. So if you want to use a little bit more of this, or a little bit less of that, do it. It's all good, can't go bad. And if your experiment comes out good, let me know. I may use it myself. Okay, step 1 is to rinse and strain all the canned beans thoroughly and place them in a bowl. David, it's your job.
Thank you, Dad. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a can of beans, we're going to pour them directly into the strainer and rinse them off thoroughly. Now, some of you may ask, why do we rinse the beans? There's that cloudy liquid in the can. Well, that cloudy liquid is starch and salt, and it can really change the flavor of the beans. And we also want to get rid of sometimes a little metallic taste that comes from the can. So we're going to strain those thoroughly, take them out, and then I'll add them to the bowl of beans that we already cleaned and strained earlier. And just like that, your beans are strained, ready to go.
The only beans that we use in this soup that do not come from a can are lentils. Now that's because they don't need to be pre-soaked, they can be cooked quickly, and frankly we think they taste better when they're freshly cooked.
You know, the bell means a fun food fact. Lentils, I'm sure you don't know this, but lentils are the oldest legume that we know of. They date back to 8,000 BC. They were found on the banks of the Euphrates River, which is now in northern Syria. So from 8,000 BC until today, we are still enjoying wonderful lentils.
Just fascinating. Let's get back to cooking.
All right, let's go back to cooking. So what we want to do is cook the lentils about 80% of the way through before adding them to the soup. This assures that they won't get too mushy while they finish cooking inside the soup. That takes about 15 to 20 minutes. So here we have the lentils boiled up. These are just about ready. We're going to take them and strain them just like we did the other beans. And there you have some beautiful lentils. Give these a quick rinse also. Sometimes the lentils can give off a little bit of dark liquid. You want to keep that out of the soup. And they'll go right in the bowl with the other beans.
Next, we finely chop the onion.
Okay, now the recipe calls for half a large white onion. Is there a reason why you only use half and not a full onion?
Well, because for my taste, a large white onion is perfect. If you happen to love onions, use more. If you don't like onions, use less, because everything is personal.
You referenced that you're cutting a white onion. Now, there's many different kinds of onions. There's the yellow ones, there's the Spanish onions, red onions. Why do you choose a white?
I choose the white onions because that's my preference, because I like the taste of white onions. They have a sharper flavor than the yellow onions. They're more tender, plus they don't have a strong aftertaste. They mix well with other ingredients, but if you have a particular onion that you like, by all means, you use your onion.
Now, you're being a real champ there, chopping these onions. I don't see you have any eyewear on other than your glasses. Onions make a lot of people cry. How were you able to do this without crying?
My eyes are tough. Onions don't bother me.
Well, that brings us to another fun food fact. So, the reason why our eyes tear when you chop an onion, there is an acid and an enzyme that gets released into the air while you're chopping it. To prevent that from happening, you can simply take the onion, throw it in the freezer for about 10 or 15 minutes before you chop it. That will thicken the enzyme and prevent it from being released into the air.
Well, won't that freeze the onion so you can't chop it?
Most onions are big enough. You throw it in the freezer 5, 10, 15 minutes. It will not affect the taste. It will not affect the consistency to chop it. And the onion will be just as good. The only difference will be whoever's cutting it may not cry.
David, since I'm not really fond of freezing my onions, I'll continue to cut them at room temperature.
All right, tough guy. Philomena didn't raise a crying boy, I guess. All right, take those onions, warm as they are, and throw them in the bowl. Let's go.
Okay, now it's time to chop the habanero.
Your favorite sound.
Again.
Another fun food fact. Habanero peppers are the hottest edible chili peppers in the world. They are up to 140 times hotter than a jalapeno pepper. Now, a jalapeno pepper you'll see in a salsa sauce or a bowl of chili, and these are 140 times hotter. So we really have to be careful in portioning out the habanero pepper.
That's why we only use a quarter of a pepper. Again, it's personal preference. You can adjust accordingly. You can use a little bit more or a little bit less, but be careful.
Okay, now what if people can't find a habanero? They're not everywhere.
That's a great question. If you can't find a habanero pepper in your area, consider substituting a Scotch bonnet pepper. They're almost identical, or you can try serrano or jalapeno. However, both of them are much lower on the heat index scale, so you need to use a little bit more or less than that. Now, remember, you need to be careful when you use these peppers. When you're cutting them, they are fireballs. So David, that's your job.
I anticipated that.
Okay.
So, I highly recommend you really have to wear gloves when you handle these peppers. There's an oil in these peppers that if it gets on your fingers and you accidentally touch your eyes, or if you use the restroom, it will really come back to haunt you and ruin what was probably a very good day. So do not handle these peppers without gloves, and when you're done cutting them, change your gloves. So, let's cut the pepper. So now, Dad, when you were growing up, did Grandma ever use habanero peppers?
No, David. Habanero pepper is a recent addition to the recipe. It was brought over by the Hispanic community, and like each ethnic group before them, people adapted to their food, to their culture, and as a result, I love the habanero peppers, as most people in Providence do. So we've incorporated many of the best recipes from the Hispanic community into our menu and our recipes as well.
Fantastic. So they brought the heat, a nice addition to the menu. Now, how's this? Is this chopped fine enough?
Oh, that's perfect, David.
All right, let's get these in the bowl and move on.
Next comes another modern twist to this dish, kale. My mother used to use mustard greens, but a couple of years ago we substituted kale for mustard greens and really loved it. David, stop. Let me guess. You have another fun fact about kale.
Indeed, I do.
Let's
Let
hear
me
it.
tell you, I know this is your favorite part of these cooking. Kale is one of the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. It's loaded with antioxidants. It's a great source of vitamin C and vitamin K. It helps lower your cholesterol. It's really a superfood.
And tastes great too. The last ingredient is one of my favorites, a ½ pound of hot Italian sausage. If you love sausage, add more. If you want vegetarian soup, you can eliminate the sausage altogether and substitute bell peppers, carrots, or the vegetable of your choice.
Now, where we live, we can buy sausage out of the casing, and most butcher shops and some gourmet supermarkets will have that. But if you can only find sausage in link form, take it out of the casing so it looks just like that.
Okay, now it's time to start cooking. We have coated the bottom of the skillet with olive oil and heated it to high heat.
Not too hot, because remember, if it's smoking, it's too hot.
First ingredients we want to add are the onions and the habanero.
And here we go.
Okay,
Onions.
we want to saute the onions until they soften and begin to brown. With a high heat, be sure to stir constantly.
Now, as you can see, we prefer to cook with a cast iron skillet. It heats all the ingredients evenly. Now, Dad, we're cooking, while we're doing this, the courts are closed due to the quarantine and the coronavirus. Do you miss going into the court and sitting on the bench?
David, I really miss it. I miss the staff. I miss Inspector Quinn. I miss Inspector Carrigan. But frankly, I miss the people that come before me most of all. You know, it gives me a great sense of accomplishment when they come before me and I'm able to do something to help them. And you know what's interesting? Many times I will find people and they will thank me. You know why? Because they believe they've been treated fairly. And when I get off the bench, I usually take inventory of my performance. And if I don't feel too good about it, I try to make up for it the next day. But I miss the people that come before me. I miss them terribly. You know, they are for the most part, they're hardworking people. You know, they get up every day, they contribute to society, they don't ask for anything. All they want is they want to be treated with respect, with dignity, understanding, compassion, and fairness. I really try to do that, and I miss them. I miss you terribly, okay? I hope we open soon. David, these look perfect. Now it's time to add the sausage.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get the sausage. Give me some space.
Okay.
Let's get the sausage in there.
Okay.
Now, the key to cooking sausage is to make sure it's brown on the outside. You don't want to cook it all the way through. You want it to finish cooking in the soup. If you cook it too much now, it'll get tough and it may dry out. So while we're talking about sausage, we have another fun food fact. I know your favorite part of these of cooking.
Oh, I can hardly wait.
We're cooking with hot Italian sausage. Now, Italian hot sausage that's made in America, in North America, is made with pork. And pork is delicious. Pork has a high fat content. Fat equals delicious. So the main flavor in hot Italian sausage, believe it or not, is fennel.
Fennel equals flavor as well.
Okay, so while you're cooking that, let's put in some crushed red pepper seeds to taste.
Black pepper.
Put in some black pepper.
You notice I'm separating the sausage so that it will cook in small pieces. You don't want to keep just a big piece of sausage in there. So you have to separate it and make sure you keep moving it all the time that it's in there, so that it will cook and mix up with the onions before we throw it into the soup. So here we go. You can see.
So go ahead, brown it up.
Now the key here is not to cook it all the way through. Just to brown the sausage, as you can see. It's getting brown now. This is looking good, David. This is looking real good.
It's looking good. Go ahead, pull that sausage apart.
You got to keep moving it. Don't let it get hard.
While you're browning the sausage, I went and got the pan that we're going to make the soup in. It's a heavy gauge steel pan. It helps to spread the heat evenly when you're cooking the soup. And as I'm looking at this, Dad, it makes me think of your son John's favorite line. It's sausage time. So that.
David, I want you to notice the skill that I'm doing this with. You know, I did this when I was in college, working at a restaurant, trying to help pay my tuition. So this is not a new experience for me. Look at this.
Okay, so now
this is working perfect.
Looks just about perfect. So let me get that and put it in the soup pan.
Okay, and it's ready.
All right, let me squeeze in there. Again, the cast iron skillets, the whole skillet gets hot. Be sure to have oven mitts or something hot. Now we want to try to keep the oil in the skillet and just put the ingredients into the soup pan. So I have a slotted spoon here to help me with that.
Good splash.
And we're ready to go for the beans. And you add the beans.
Next, we add the chicken stock. Now, I like to use a 32-ounce box. So we're going to add the chicken stock to this.
Don't be afraid to squeeze that box. Okay.
Just perfect.
And then we're going to add enough vegetable broth so that it's an inch or two above the beans.
Okay. That's just about right.
Okay. Here's your bouillon cube, your chicken bouillon.
Next, we add a bouillon cube, right, which we put into the soup. Now, the reason we put a bouillon cube into the soup is so that we can add richness without adding more liquid. So it's a trick. And now that all the ingredients, except the kale, are in the soup pot, you want to turn the temperature up and bring the soup to a boil and stir it. Now, because we're coming to you live and we know that there are very few things in life more boring than watching soup cook, I will walk you through the rest of the recipe. When the soup begins to boil, reduce the heat to low and simmer for about 15 minutes, stirring it occasionally.
After 15 minutes, add the kale. Then let the soup simmer for another 5 minutes, then it's ready.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, what? We don't get to see the finished soup? Come on. Would we do that to you? No way. Because we value your time, we cooked a batch this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Filomena's Zuppa di Fagioli.
Maron! And the only thing left is to put it in the bowl.
Add some grated Reggio Parmigiano cheese to the top of the soup and serve with a hot crusted piece of Italian bread, and enjoy. Until we see you again, please be well, be safe, and be considerate. Also, please wear a mask when you go outside. If not for you, how about me? I'd really appreciate it. Till we meet again, stay in good health.